And you already started a trade war. Japan-America. China-America. So this global village, the shrunk world, will it have to control itself? Will it find itself needing to look after needy countries more than they have? Will they be able to completely neglect a Bosnia in the future? And the United States is a superpower, but again, a little bit less than what she was. For your economy. It was a question here, if Gingrich or whoever it is cuts down aid. You asked me this question. Which is not because of bad senators. The attempt of achieving peace, the fact that we are at peace with Egypt for 16, 17 years. Jordan has just joined the club. Arafat is around the corner talking. Assad is a different story. And the big question is, how do we consolidate our life in the Middle East with all the problems that we have? The other subject to be discussed is world Jewry. You can answer it better than I can. What is your future? What is Israel going to look like in 25 years' time? And what is world Jewry going to look like in 25 years' time? You can always spend 4 years in university studying that. Where some of us believe, I definitely myself, that the future of Judaism in the diaspora is in a question mark. That we in Israel have to do certain things to watch out and look for the image or for the character of Israel in 25 years' time. What is going to be a young Israeli in 25, 30 years' time? My youngest granddaughter is 4. What is she going to be like when she's 30 and has a few children? I hope so. And I will not be around. What is it you say? I'll be pushing up daisies, eh? So these are questions that are important. We can go deep into them. We can just skim them. I'm at your service. This is a broad aspect. Anyone wants to ask questions? Shoot.
Well, obviously he means it, so shoot.
Herb, sit down. I've tackled the problems bigger than this. Yes, sir.
What do you view as the greatest threat facing Israeli society today? Over the past couple of days, we've had some discussions with a variety of speakers who range from MTV to the Arabs. What are your perspectives?
My instinct immediately was to tell you Madonna. And usually the first instinct is the correct one, which tags along to what I've said, what sort of a society we're going to be in the future, whether it's 20, 25, 5 years. And like sometimes Americans ask, what sort of Jews are you? And I think it's not a good question, because I can answer, what sort of Jews are you? And we can start Jewing ourselves. I think the threat, if there is one, by the way, we live now in much less threat than we were living in the beginning. For instance, there's no threat for the existence of Israel like we had 25 years ago. Egypt, Sinai, the East, Iraq is neutralized, Jordan, etc. And even terror you can tackle in a way. I hope that the poof. And the biggest problem is we ourselves, because the rift, the disagreement amongst ourselves about the future solution of what sort of Israel we want is the biggest problem. And the biggest problem is the biggest threat. This afternoon, the rabbis of Israel came out with a religious decree that it's contrary to the Jewish religion to leave military camps in the Western Bank, and they allowed soldiers not to obey an order. I came out roaring at them on television a few minutes ago, telling them that this is the beginning of almost a mutiny, and this is the beginning of real trouble. Because if we come to a stage where, with all due respect, rabbis will decide on the conduct of the military, this is the beginning of lots of troubles. Right now, I think this is the main threat. Okay? Yes?
President, you're in the state of Israel. Can you point to a high point and low point and maybe that way up?
High points and low points. Okay, because we had a few high points. Look, I never troubled myself to think about this. I was born here. My late mother was born here. Father came here in the second Aliyah. And all our life, our generation, which is I was born in 1924, which makes me 71, whether I like it or not. I don't mind it so much. And we had one task in education, is to see that Zionism is performed, meaning Aliyah, meaning tilling the land, meaning development of industry, development of universities. Before the creation of the state, we had 3 universities here. The Hebrew University, the Technion in Haifa, and the Weizmann Institute. So there was such a long history, such deep roots. Of course, the greatest thing that happened was the decision on the creation of the State of Israel. And after especially the Second World War, and I can go again about the Holocaust and the Tzoros and the problems that we've had, and as soon as the decision was taken by the UN, which was a great moment, I was already a year in Israel back from the wars. I came back in 1947, yes. About 5 years abroad, about 4 years in the Royal Air Force. And not the only one. There were 30,000 Israelis who joined the British forces, Army, Navy, Air Force in the Second World War. And immediately the war started. Immediately trouble started with the Palestinians. And on the 15th of May, the Egyptians, Syrians, Lebanese, Jordanians, Iraqis, Saudis attacked us. I don't want to go again through the 1948 war. If anyone doesn't know what happened here in the Independence War, then War of Independence, then there's better study. The second great moment was the end of the 48 war, when we found ourselves with a state. Borders that we liked, borders that we didn't like. By the way, we could have had better borders if we had more strength in 1948. More strength meant more Jews fighting for the State of Israel. How many American Jews served in the American Army in the Second World War? Does anyone know? How many? Yes? Herb?
Yeah.
I didn't ask whether you served or not. How many Jews served in the U.S. Army?
American Jews?
Yes.
About 350,000. Third of the million.
What I needed perhaps 2% or 3% of that, they would have come to fight in Israel, the whole thing would have been different. But this is whiskey spilled, or milk, or whatever you want, whatever you drink. And no joke, if we had 5, 7, 10,000 extra soldiers to fight the War of Independence, the thing would have been different. And we started the long track of building the country, bringing North African Jews, Iraqi Jews. Perhaps the second important thing was the 6-Day War, which was not very planned. It came to us because of mistakes by the Arab world. For instance, on the 5th of June in the morning, we sent a cable to King Hussein that it's between the Egyptians and us, and he'd better be quiet. And he then excused himself that Nasser told him that Tel Aviv was burning, and he attacked us at about 11 o'clock on the 5th of June, shelling Jerusalem, shelling a few other parts. So he took a deep breath and took the Western Bank and Jerusalem. I know that we have to apologize for winning wars ever since, but that's much better this way than the other way around. One of the great, say, negative impacts was the October War, which came as a surprise to a lot of us, disappointment to a lot of us, but still, Israel Defense Forces fought back. And it's funny that in many respects this brought the negotiations with the Egyptians. These were about high points. Another high point is when you absorb 500,000 Jews in 5-6 years. This is the high point. All of them speaking Russian, not English, by the way. It's a pity. I'd like to have at least 100,000 speaking English. And so on and so forth. You're welcome. Yes.
Mr. President, for the first time since Israel was about 5 years old, the United States Congress has taken a political change where the Senate and House are now run by Republicans. And a few days after the most recent election, Senator Thurman announced that Foreign Affairs Committee is going to reduce foreign aid to countries. I'm curious to know what your concerns are for Israel.
Look, we live very well with the United States. And to a certain degree, the aid is of United States interest, to a certain degree, especially the arms ones. Because when we get F-16s and F-15s that are chalked off $1.8 billion account, it's the American industry that produces them, not the Chinese. So I don't say that we're doing a favor to the United States, but one should look at it also that way. I think that we should be prepared that a thing like this can happen. We had Republican administrations before. We had Nixon. We had a great Republican, Henry Kissinger. Republican, right? So Republicans to me is not a frightening terminology or a Democrats. We'll see. We'll see. The United States also has a few problems, and we'll get along. By the way, who do you think will get elected?
Which election?
Next year. Presidential? Yes. Now here we don't know yet. Here it's a mishmash. But do you think Clinton has a chance?
Mr. President, I predicted that Pete Wilson would be re-elected as governor of California when he was down in the polls by about 30 to 70%.
What are you, a magician?
I think President Clinton will be re-elected.
Okay. Yes.
Early next week, we'll all return to our respective communities across the United States. I wondered, is there a message you would like us to take back to our respective Jewish communities?
Yeah.
And is there a message that might quickly that you would want us to take back?
My only message as President of the State of Israel and President of the Zionist state and the Jewish state is don't do me any favors, do yourselves, come here. Okay? Yes? I'm not the only one. You haven't heard anything until you heard a few others. But I said a few days ago in the lecture somewhere that I hope and pray that in the future, not so distant, the budget of the Ministry of Education will be higher than the budget of the Defense Ministry. That's my answer. Sir.
Mr. President, does the Knesset have the political will to make peace with the Palestinian and with the Syrian government?
Look, the will of the Knesset is the question of majority. This is the basics of democracy. And Churchill said two very important things. One is a majority, and democracy is a bad system, but all other systems are worse. And I like Churchill very much. I never knew him personally, but he's got some very good sayings. It's not a question of will. It's a question of conception. And if a conception has the majority, then the Knesset has the will. We'll see what happens. Yes, just a minute.
President, one of the miracles of your global last decade has been the turnaround of the economy as well.
Miracles?
It's been pretty dramatic for 85.
Do you believe in miracles? I don't. Yes, okay.
But in that respect, in the economy today, which has significant GDP growth, the average Israeli young, and you talk about your granddaughter, the average Israeli today who's under 30 years old can't afford a house in this country. And as you try and encourage Aliyah, how is it that if one cannot afford a house, that you would...
Who told you that the average Israeli cannot afford a house?
Many Israelis.
Many Israelis cannot afford a house, but a lot get a house. And who are all these buildings being built for? Have you seen the action in building? Have you seen a country being built? Who are they built for? Monkeys? What? No, look, it's difficult, but any new Ole, has more of a chance of getting an apartment than this young man. Yes, Khadira? Okay? But the question is, with a little bit of effort, he will get it. I'm sure he will. Perhaps he will not get a house with a little bit of ground and a garden around, which is the dream of everybody. He'll get an apartment. Not a big apartment, but a livable apartment. I think it's highly exaggerated. No. He has problems. He'll have to work his ass off. And how the hell are we now 4.5 million Jews in Israel when we can't get a partner? It's difficult. It's a problem, but it's not impossible. A new immigrant? Here, he shook his head, and it's a free country. He's my shadow. If I annoy him, he could bump me off. And sorry, later. Yes.
Mr. President, before you came in this afternoon, I asked the question, what is the most controversial question we could ask you? The suggestion was to ask you about... I won't say who said it, but the suggestion was...
Herb said it, eh?
Well, close. The suggestion very seriously was to ask you about your thoughts about continuing the peace negotiations with the PLO, in light of the fact that the suggestion has been made in the past to suspend those...
I made it. Yeah, I did. Yeah? No, well, I did not say. What?
I have two questions. The first question is in fact that's the most controversial question we can ask you? And what is the answer to the question?
Look, it's a serious question. I don't know whether it's controversial or not. It's a very serious question. And when I said what I said was a few months ago when there were 20 Israelis lying dead in the streets of Tel Aviv. And there was no sign on the side of the PLO that they're going to do something about it. And I said in negotiations, sometimes you suspend. You don't stop them. I didn't recommend stopping. I said suspending. And I think that, I don't know whether it's because I said so, but there was a suspension. The fact is that until now we haven't got an agreement. And eventually we shall get an agreement because we have to live with the Palestinians, because we are part of the Middle East, and we have to find a way to do that. I want to go into the philosophy of how Jews and Arabs will live together. So I don't think it's a controversial question. I said what I said when I thought it was appropriate to say, and I'm supporting now whatever I think I should support. I'm not doing things just to be controversial. I thought at that time, which was I think 6 months ago, I don't remember, when a bus blew up in Tel Aviv, and before that a few other actions, and nothing was done, I said what I said. I think that now there are signs, I wouldn't vouch for it 100%, that are taking matters in hand far stronger than they did last time, in the past, that they show signs of an attempt of an ability to govern themselves. Because it's not only a question of security, it's a question of governing themselves. And Gaza is not an easy place. I don't know whether anyone thought that we should stay in Gaza. There are only about 800,000 people there, which is not a very pleasant place to live in. So I don't think it's a controversial question. I think it was a very, very good question. And I think that what I did at that time was appropriate to my way of thinking. And now I'm fully in agreement for the continuation of talk. If there's something I wouldn't like along the way, I'll say it. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President, what do you see as a possible solution for peaceful coexistence within the realm of the bounds of Jerusalem?
First of all, we are the majority in Jerusalem, which makes life easier. Jews are the majority. Secular and non-secular. Very soon the Orthodox will be the majority. But that's not the question. Or might be the majority. I think that if we stand firm on a united city, that municipally it's definitely united, and that on the religious parts of it, everybody looks after its own shrines the way it's been done now, which was not before the State of Israel. And we stand firm on that. And the citizens of Jerusalem, the Arabs, will be Israeli citizens, knowing and paying attention to the special problems and the special wishes and the special demands of the Arab population. Like we do in Israel today. We have 1 million Arabs in Israel, majority Muslims, then Christians, and then Druze, which are a minority, despite the fact that they serve in the army more than anyone else. And we try and cater for their special needs. I think this should be done in Jerusalem too, not to forget and not to ignore the needs of other denominations and other people. If we do that, it will be a very Jewish way of doing things. Yes, sir, up there. You, yes. Yeah? Well, there's a decision by the Prime Minister that if nothing is done before there's a referendum, and the people will be asked to decide, yay or nay. What could be more democratic than that? Bumper, schmumper. This is it. Okay? Thank you. Yes, sir.
President, historically, part of a Judaic campaign has been support of Israel because Israel has been at risk.
That Israel is what?
Is at risk.
At risk, yes.
At risk in danger. And economically as well. As these roles change, what is your perspective on the redefinition of that role?
Okay. Right. First of all, some Israelis now changed the UJA from United Jewish Appeal to United Jordan Appeal. But this is not serious. I think that we should not approach world Jewry through being small, vulnerable, miserable anymore. I don't think we were ever miserable. We were vulnerable. And there were times that we needed more help than we need now. And as you said quite rightly, and my friend over there said quite rightly, that economics-wise, we're much sounder than what we were. I think the whole relationship between world Jewry and Israelis should be really looked into very deeply. I would not like to see the continuation of relationship through contributions to UJA or bonds. And there's a great difference if someone decides they want to contribute to a university or to a hospital, which is done in America every day by Ford Foundations, etc., and Harvard and Yale are all living on contributions, or not all, but mainly. So we need a change. And I myself, which I'm speaking for myself now, not as president, I haven't taken part in any UJA bonds, I think, for about 10 years. I think that there's a big problem to which you can enlighten me more is about Jewish education in the United States. You've been approaching me, and not only me, about Jewish continuity. My immediate answer as a president and as a Zionist, continuity is only in Israel. Is it good enough? Some people say no, because some Americans want to live in America, and I can't tell them that not to do that. I can persuade them. But what is continuation of being Jews? And could be that some of the money you should use for yourself for Jewish education, for Hebrew education and Jewish education, because America, because the Jewish community of the world, which includes the Argentine and France and England and the United States, I think is in trouble in the very terminology that you invented, continuity. I don't want to go through the questioning again of how much intermarriage is in the United States, how many Jews are being lost not through wars but through assimilation. And therefore, the problem of preserving the Jews in the world is mainly a problem that you should answer yourselves. The relationship with us, it's not anymore because we are living under risky conditions that we were, because amongst other things, the United States government, thank God, is looking after that. And this is roughly my answer, which is not black and white. It's a grayish answer. Zava, הקירור עובד כאן? חם לי, אני מת. Yeah. Okay. Who else? Yes, sir.
President, what do you see as your greatest challenge personally as president of Israel?
Well, תודה רבה. You see, you heat me up. I'll tell you what, first of all, I never thought that I'll take up this job of being president of the state of Israel for various reasons. But when I myself decided to leave active politics, about 4 years ago, I stood one day in the Knesset and resigned from the Knesset and went happily to my little house in Caesarea, which is nice. It took me about 30 years to get this house. And when I decided, okay, I'll take the challenge. And I'll be quite frank, because I wanted to end up my public career in another contribution if possible. And I'll most likely retire after my first term, 5 years, and I'll be 74, then I'll say goodbye to the public. It's been nice knowing you, and I'll go down to my little house. And then I asked myself, what do you want from yourself? And I said to my wife and I, especially to myself, I said, if I reach after a certain time a situation whereby an average Israeli who gets up in the morning will have one spot at the top that he doesn't hate, I've achieved my aim. Okay? After that, Bob's your uncle. Yes.
You made a comment about the rabbis coming about the military. What influence do you think they should have? And you can comment on the question of who is that an area to that they should control?
Yes, they should, to a certain degree, of course. We all live in a country that they have a hell of a say, more than the rabbis in America. You get married rabbinically, you get buried rabbinically, you get circumcised rabbinically, you get divorced rabbinically. I went through part of it. And I think that we have to preserve a certain tradition that is in cooperation with the rabbis, definitely. But this does not mean that the rabbis have the authority to say what is a correct order to the army and what is not. This rebelled me completely, and I came out to them. Immediately as I heard the decision, I shot off in television and radio. It's probably on the radio and television all the time. And I'm not the only one. Not the only one. And I got telephones from a few rabbis who supported me. I won't mention their names for their safety, but they did. 2. So in our country, I don't think it's time to break away from our traditions, which is, I don't think it's got much to do with who is a Jew. I know the problem of American Jewry, of marriages, of divorces, I'd rather have the influence of the rabbis as we have here than intermarriages in America. Yes, sir. What, you're talking about Israel or you're talking about Egypt? Oh, I see. Yeah. Yes? Look, first of all, I cannot run the government of Egypt, the government of Jordan. And leaders take risks and have to lead their people. We had a great leader. I had the great honor of being his number 2 and his defense minister, the late Mr. Begin, may his soul rest in peace, who took a great decision. He left the Sinai. He took off settlements. He went to the international border, and he created the autonomy. People tend to forget it. I left him because he didn't continue in what he started. I always say that Geula Cohen, you've heard of the lady, she's one of the toughest hoo-hoos, that she left the Charut party because of the line that was started. I left because we diverted from the line we started. This is a small difference, but it's a very, very big one. So, again, Sadat took a great decision. He was shot. But his spirit is alive. And Mubarak, who was his number 2, continues. And if he has terror in Egypt, it's not because of the peace treaty with us. It's because of Islamic problems, because of 101 things. King Hussein is in the process now of establishing himself after the peace process. I think that he is also a brave man and took a risk. Less than Sadat, because Hussein has been with us all the time, and Hussein did it. And anyway, I don't want to analyze the difference. And Arafat too. Look, I'm not defending Arafat, but he's stuck in Gaza. He's, I wouldn't say virtually the mayor of Gaza, because Gaza is not a city. Gaza is a million people in various little entities. But he's got problems. He's got very, very unpleasant opposition to him. So it's leaders who have to take decisions depending on the public opinion, analyzing before they take the decision what the public opinion will be like, and working for that to improve and change the public opinion in their favor. Take, for example, 2 examples here, which does not answer your question completely. I'll come back to it. But when the Likud was in power and Labour was in opposition, and we left the Sinai, and we had an agreement with Egypt, 90 members of the Knesset voted for the agreement out of 120. Now Labour is in power and Likud is in opposition. About almost 100 voted for the peace with Jordan, which comes which indicates that if you know how to tackle the public opinion, if you have a solution that is thinkable, that is logical, the public will agree. The public is not stupid. The public is a wise group. Now in Egypt and in Jordan, they have problems, but they control it, and we find it now that, for instance, the canal is open. Israeli shipping come and go, including Israeli Navy. If they want to go through, they have to notify. They go through missile boats and a submarine here and there if we want to. I don't know whether lately they've been. I haven't checked out there. And there's trade going on, not phenomenal trade. And I'd rather have this cool relationship than a hot war. And Hussein will do the same thing. And each and every one is a different story, because Egypt is a big country with almost 60 million people. The Egyptians usually tease the Jordanians. The whole of Jordan is 10% of Cairo. 1.8 million. Cairo is about 20 million. So, and the Palestinians are a different kettle of fish. And when this gentleman up in Damascus will decide one day that he wants to talk like he should talk, which right now I wouldn't talk to him the way he's being talked into. And I think I told Mr. Christopher, I don't understand you. You persuaded your president to go to Damascus. What has he done? The gentleman that gave him a cup of coffee, a cake, a little bit of pistachios, and said, very nice knowing you, and he went back home. President of the United States. So when he comes to see the light, it'll be a different attitude too. But it's up to leaders to take difficult decisions and see to that the public is with them. Some do it better, some do it less, some lose their lives. May his soul rest in peace. My good friend Anwar Sadat. Yes, madam. I should look. I need a little bit of leftish inclinations today, after the lady, okay? Well, I think we are not as Am Echad as we should be. No, honestly, otherwise we should have been by now 30, 40 million. And we're not. And not only because of the 6 million of the Holocaust. And we're sort of chugging along at 13 million, because we lose all the time. And we should see to that we are as united as possible. There's a difference sometimes between parts of a certain diaspora in Israel. To me, the Am Echad is in Israel. The 4.5 million Israelis, to me, is a nation. I don't want to criticize you. You want to live wherever you live. You definitely enjoy it. You feel Jewish the way you feel. You feel now probably in America better than what your ancestors felt about 50 years ago. Definitely. You're in campuses and universities feel more free than in Harvard or Yale in the 30s. Does it unite you more? Or does it hamper more being Jews? I think this question of being Am Echad is a philosophical question, which I think Israel proves that it is, because if we have 50,000 Ethiopians who were absorbed, and 500,000 Russians who are being absorbed very nicely, who hardly knew anything about Judaism, but speak Hebrew now, and some of them are army officers, and in all parts of industry and science you see them, I wouldn't start discussing Am Echad or not. Come with me to some of the industries of Israel and see whether we are not. Yes or no? Yes, sir.
President, actually the last question, the philosophical one, relates to mind, the more practical one.
Well, perhaps you can answer the question. No, I'm not, it's not my duty to answer all the questions. And I don't pretend knowing all the answers. Can you answer the question? Are we Am Echad, yes or no?
Can I answer the question? I'm here to ask questions.
You avoid the issue, but okay.
My way of saying yes. My question, which I'll tell you in a minute, I also have no idea how to answer it. Hopefully you can. Israel is, of course, a Zionist nation and one of the world's great democracies. And in many of the articles and studies that I have read, the demographics indicate that the non-Jewish population of Israel, while perhaps percentage-wise slowed by the immigration from the Soviet Union, continues to grow in percentage. My question is that phenomenon continues to occur, continues to grow. How can Israel, on the one hand, maintain its Zionist
It's Jewishness, okay?
and on the other hand, retain its democracy?
Okay. Well, democracy you can retain. The question with how much difficulties. Because you're quite right that the demography should be is a problem to be looked into for the future. Right now, the 18% non-Jewish population in Israel. And in the future, it is very likely to increase to closer to 20 to 30. Even some people say 30-40. We'll have to have the democracy, free elections, and hope that some of the Arab voters will vote in favor of the states and not in favor of separation, which is actually what is going on now at 18%, and we hope to have it at double that, let's say 36%. And there's no reason why we shouldn't retain it. Because the Arab population here, we're not doing them any favor, are having the highest standard of living, average, or high standard of living in the Middle East. They have complete freedom of worship. They have their problems, and some of them quite rightly. They come in certain demands. They're quite rightly, budget-wise, and how to run their own villages and towns. It's a problem that can also be tackled easily. I can tell you, if 2 million American Jews would come, we'll balance it off, which is easy to say. And I say it. Aliyah, an increase in population might balance it off. But looking at it seriously and honestly, we'll have a problem in the future of a high minority. And we'll have to cater for democracy with them. And I think we can do that. When we come to cross the bridge, we'll see how we cross it. But there is a problem. Yes, my lady, up there.
President, I recently read an article in the Free Press of the United States targeting Israel and the post-Zionism, post-Zionism aid.
There's no post-Zionism.
This is what the writer said, and he pointed to two factors. One being a change in the country, that my generation of Israelis doesn't necessarily feel that time constructive. That was much more of a feeling toward the individual. Also, this writer, I think they was very European, I think he made out several years ago.
You made. He made.
No, the writer of the article.
Yeah. Well, from the States.
I think he made out the
Yeah. Zava, tni mi kos mayim, b'bakasha. Yes.
Also, she said he was left in the population was going to be somewhat resilient and that there really isn't room for any more mass aliyah.
No more room in Israel for more Aliyah. Look, okay, my dear girl, look. Look. I found lately that some of my brethren, meaning Jews, find all sorts of reasons why not to make Aliyah. Good luck to them. But let's be honest, I like living in America. Don't start telling me problems of housing, which is legitimate to say, and don't start telling me there's no room to, as the British say, to swing a cat. I say that all Israelis are wise, are correct. No, honestly, Israel can absorb thousands and thousands more. For instance, the Negev. The Negev is completely neglected. In the Galilee, where you have quite a lot of Arabs, you can develop Carmiel. You know Carmiel? Which is the beauty of a city. You can develop Tzfat or Kiryat Shmona. I can say easily 1 million more Jews into Israel. Easily. The question is not whether we can absorb them. The question is, where are they? Okay? Yes, I'll start from there, working south. Yes. The answer is no, probably, and I'm not speaking for a government. So you want to live in a Palestinian entity? Cross the road. But to never have autonomy in the Galilee or anywhere else like this, never. We'll have the problem that this good friend of mine asked, where we have a high percentage of Arab voters for the Knesset, which is likely that we'll have instead of, I don't know how many, 7 Arab members of the Knesset, we might have 20 or 25. But autonomy, out of the question. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, twice has been mentioned both with respect to Jewish education and with Aliyah. Why aren't we doing more in the United States? I think for at least 40 years now, there are many of us who think we
A lot is being done in that. You probably don't know. A lot is being done in that. In summer camps, a lot is being done with youth coming from Europe and youth coming from America. And UJA is an independent entity, the Jewish agency. There's a lot they can do. The question is, what does the Jewish community, how does the Jewish community of the United States, whether it's unified community or not, before we talk about Am Echad, what is the American community? I know so many presidents in the United States of various and all sorts of Michigas, and I don't know what they are. So, a lot can be done. There's a voice for American Jewish community in the UJA. Usually the UJA is influenced by non-Israelis far more than Israelis. We're all for it. We're all for it if there's a chance there'll be a little bit of aliyah coming out of these summer camps, which there is. Yes. Wow. Quite a questioning crowd. Yes?
Do you support the highway that's being built?
Chotzei Israel. The new highway plan.
The second part of that is my observation. I'm just driving here for the last 2 weeks and talking to a lot of my Israeli friends. They just simply can't get from here to there anymore very easily.
Look. Of course, I'd rather fly a helicopter that drives in out to probably Prime Minister driving, because we have a helicopter that he and I may mostly use. Israel has developed in the last 20 years, since the October War, since the Yom Kippur War, fantastically. The growth was crazy. The growth now has sort of cooled off to about 5%. But you don't know what the roads were like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. The roads have advanced, have improved tremendously. There are certain hours, rush hours, that all over the world, people get stuck. Whether it's London, New York, Los Angeles, Paris. Same thing happens here. The road that is planned north and south claims to probably solve a few problems. We need a railway. But it's very expensive and very difficult to develop a real railway going from north to south. Medicine. So, first of all, what would Israelis do if there weren't traffic blocks? What would they complain about? Yes, sir.
Mr. President, I know you don't find this unbelievable as a politician in Israel, but I find the Israeli political system puzzling.
More puzzling than Clinton now that hasn't got a house backing him?
Well, that's a good point.
So let's puzzle together. You puzzle on me and I'll puzzle on you. And let's have a good time.
There's changes in the Israeli political system with the recollections of finance for next year. There was a recent report to the controversial statements that you made a few months ago. I don't find the content of this that you making statements is controversial. Perhaps what's more controversial in the Israeli political system is that the president is taking strong, vigorous stands in public debate. What I would be interested in hearing from you, Mr. President, is what ideas for change, if you think there is any change necessary in the Israeli system.
Yeah, look, the position of the president is a unique one. What I said and what I did surprised a few people, but there's nothing in the law that says that I cannot. The law says the president is the head of state. At the head of the state is a president. In Hebrew it says, Berosh HaMedina Omed Nasi. He's domiciled in Jerusalem. Voila. And I sign laws. Nobody says what happens if I refuse to sign a law. And I had a bit of a question on one of the offshoots of the law. I took part in dealing with life sentences, and I changed a few things. But I have the ability to pardon, which I have a whole system of pardoning, which I changed to because I thought it was too automatic. And I'm not an executive president like the United States president. The United States president is a prime minister. In a certain way, he is directly elected prime minister, period. You call him president, good luck to you. Our directly elected prime minister in the future would not have the checks and balances that you have in the United States, which is bad. And eventually this system will show that you need a few checks and balances. I don't think the system is so puzzling. It's a proportional representation that every 25 or 30,000 Israeli can vote for a candidate, and then you need a coalition, like many other countries. I think that the system in England, for instance, of constituency, or in America, that you voted territorially, I think will probably also find will succumb one day. Because I'll give you two examples, which is puzzling to me. And I know the British system, and I think I know a little bit of the American electoral system. At one time, I was plugging for phantoms to get a force for the Israeli Air Force when I was Air Force commander many years ago. And I was told, go and find Senator Symington. He is from St. Louis, Missouri. That's what produced the phantoms. He'll help you. Meaning what? That he is looking after the local problems and not of the international problems. Because perhaps the United States government thought that it was not appropriate to give us phantoms, but he'll push it hard because he wants to sell because he wants to produce more phantoms in Missouri. May his soul rest in peace, and he was a nice gentleman, candidate for presidency. Another example, which I didn't experience personally, again in aviation, is when there's a big discussion about concluding the production of Concords in Europe. And one of the aviation papers came out with an article saying that the chances of production in England would continue because the aviation minister comes from the area where it's being produced. So the question is, an elected person to Congress or Parliament, is he looking after national interests or local interests? Local interests, you have governors and you have mayors. Therefore, I have puzzled at your system too, because I know that you have lobbies galore from here to kingdom come, including the Israeli lobbies. Everybody lobbies for corn or for Detroit, for that. Is this a good system? I don't know, but you're living with it. I once was asked, why don't you want to be elected as a mayor of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem? I said, I want to deal with the national garbage, not with the municipal garbage. So it's puzzling, schmuzzling, but it's a system. Okay, there's a lady way up north, yeah. But a bit loud. I can hear. Mm-hmm. We'll have 1 million new Jews here?
Over in 10 more years.
Yes, I hope so. I don't know about you, Rabbi, but I'll tell you what I predict. Israel will be, in 15, 20 years' time, 6 million, at least, and world Jewry will probably be 4 to 5. We are now the second largest community in the world, and very likely we're going to be the largest community because there's a diminishing factor in the diaspora, Europe, America, South America, because of the reasons I said before.
Well, this leads to a major shift in the way things are. The question I'd like to ask you is, particularly at your age, you suddenly want to actually put a bit of philosophy. Putting all this meaning, you think maybe that the Messiah is coming?
What rabbi are you going to? I don't want to be unpleasant to people who think differently. I think you're just joking. I think that this is a fulfillment of Zionism. I think this is a fulfillment of Judaism, that for years people have been praying, L'Shana Haba Yerushalayim. And this is what is happening. Messiah or no Messiah. Of course, you know the story about the village fool who was given a job with the bugle. You sound, blow your trumpet when the Messiah is coming. It's a guaranteed lifetime job. Not very well paid. It's an old joke. Yes. That presidents in the future will act and behave and do certain things, and that the average Israeli will not hate them. Okay? Yes, sir.
As I reflect on the last few years, one of the most profound emotional experiences I've had in watching the strength of Israel and the missiles that are being fired in the near popular by the Iraqis. And I wonder what sort of fear or risk is Israel at from a person like Saddam Hussein, who appears to be so crazy?
Well, first of all, we are one of the few countries who experienced missiles. The first one to experience was London in the 40s, 45. And then Baghdad and Tehran missiled each other. Anyhow, I'm in a good club. But if we talk about that experience of the Gulf, which for me was not a war, it was an American Rangers in Iraq, commonly known as the Gulf War. There were 700 Americans with harpoons flying in B-36s and you name it, carriers, etc. And Saddam Hussein is still alive. So what's the, well, it's a game. I think we should have attacked Iraq. I think so. I said so in the Knesset. I can say it now. At least what we thought were the missile bases. And I think we knew what the missile bases were. And it's the first time in the history of Israel, which I don't like, that Israel was hurt and didn't do anything about it. And relied on a friendly country to help us. I hope it will never happen again. And that we are attacked, and if we are attacked, that we will not retaliate. First of all, it's a good, America has problems. America has economic problems, social problems. Where do I see America in the next 20 years? That's a good question. It's not a question only in America. Where does the world go? Because you have one important country that people sort of poo-poo aside, it's Russia. And we still don't know what's going on there. Because Russia has still got about 20,000 atomic bombs, which, cross your fingers, nobody ever will use. And the question is the world in general. We are now 5.5 billion people, population of the world. It will increase in the foreseeable future to 8, mostly in Africa and Asia. There's a question of Europe and America as a European country vis-a-vis the non-European world. The first impact we had, or you had, was Japan. Because the greatest impact America got was from American cars. And about 20 years ago, a Japanese was quoted to say, when people asked him, will you have another Pearl Harbor? He said, no, never. Next time we should buy Pearl Harbor. Well, they're also now not as hot as they were, but the world has become, as you can say, it's a shrunk world, it's a global village, whatever terminology you use. It's a different world to the world pre-Second World War, definitely a different world to 30, 40 years ago. Again, I don't have to go to things that are obvious, that it's a mechanized world, it's a computerized world, it's an information world, it's a world full of computers. I bet when you were 10 years old, you didn't fiddle in a computer like a brother or a son of yours or like my grandchildren do. So it's a different world. I'm being sometimes taught by one of my 13-year-old grandson how to bang about one of his computers. And the house is full of them. And by the way, Israeli schools are completely computerized, all of them, from kindergarten, just to. So the question is not where America is going. For instance, only Russian communism has collapsed. Chinese communism has not.